Greetings. This is Real Talk. Excuse me. This is Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation. And I'm your host, Sundiata Keita Cha-Jua. And my first guest tonight is Dr. Jakobi Williams. Dr. Williams is the Ruth N. Hall's Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of African American and African Diaspora Studies, and he holds a joint appointment in the Department of History at Indiana University in Bloomington. He is a civil rights, Black power, social justice, and African American history scholar. Dr. Williams has served as a consultant regarding civil rights issues and history for the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the National Civil Rights Museum, and the Social Justice Initiative at the University of Illinois, Chicago. His most recent book is From Bullet to Ballot, the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party and Racial Coalition Politics in Chicago. Dr. Williams, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here on Real Talk. You know, you're one of the premier young scholars today. Dr. Williams, so I always begin my broadcast by trying to dig into biographical issues. So I asked my guests to talk a little bit about their background. And so what I want to do is kind of excavate your social background. So can you tell us when and where you were born, where you did your where you spent your formative years, and how did your class background, the place and time in which you grew up impact your developing political consciousness and your decision to be a scholar of Black history, particularly the Black liberation movement?
Well, I was born and raised in Chicago, South Side, Inglewood. I am the baby of the 70s, came of age in the 80s. I often advertise that I'm from Inglewood because most people who understand Chicago know what that means. Most of the time you see most of what's taking place on the news is taking place in my neighborhood. I'm no different from those folks. I've been on my own since I was 13. My parents, as a child of the 80s, were victims of crack epidemic, mass incarceration, and all the other issues, Reaganomics, and all the other issues that plagued our community. So we pretty much raised ourselves. So from age 13 up, I pretty much been paying my own rent and bills and take care of my siblings and do what I had to do. Can't get a job at age 13, so I was in the streets, 71st and Stewart, where I grew up, GD headquarters. That's what I ran with. That's what I was making my money with.
Brother Williams, not everybody's from Chicago. So can you pull back, okay, and tell us how many siblings you had and where you are in the order. It sounds like you're the oldest child. And then when you say GD, if you're from Chicago, you're from Illinois, we know what you're talking about. But we got folks from DC and New York and every other place, my brother. So
all right. So Inglewood is probably the roughest area on the south side of Chicago. I'm sure there's some West Siders who give us a run for our money, North Lawndale, some others, Austin area on the west side, some others. But I'm the oldest of three. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, 2 years older than my sister. I am 6 years older than my brother. So you could imagine the kind of fights we had. Here I am playing daddy. And you know how siblings argue and bicker, and I'm trying to actually be in charge and raise them, and my sister doesn't want to conform. So it's a lot of, I won't say physical abuse, but you gotta do what you gotta do in those kind of conditions in those neighborhoods. But we didn't suffer from many missed meal cramps. We had a lot of people in the neighborhood, the community who knew our situation. My grandmother, who had brain cancer at the time, she did as best as she could for us before she passed away. And then my mother's boyfriend, Jack, who didn't really have any place to go either, another, lack of a better term, crackhead. He played a little role here and there, but so it helped me purchase the building that we lived in, the raggedy, dilapidated thing place we stayed in. Cost $8,000. They tell you how raggedy the place was. Ended up losing it because I didn't know you were supposed to pay property taxes. Thought once you bought the place, you just had it. But I'm a kid, didn't know any better. So in the South Side of Chicago, you have probably you got a number of gangs, what we call street organizations. Back then we wouldn't call ourselves gangs. We were really organized. And so my forte began when I was in 6th grade as one of the lit teachers. I've always been a bright individual, and most of the people who were in charge and leadership were probably around my age now. So I'm really a baby running around these grown men. And so I didn't start off that way. I started off by going to meetings and then doing security. See, back then, most of the people involved in the organization, we all sold drugs, we all sold crack, but I got $250 a night just to do security. So I stand on the railroad tracks, scream, 47 East, 47 West, 47 up the alley, whatever the case may be. And 71st and Stewart was GD headquarters for the city. So this is where most of the board members are from, in Inglewood, Eric Hoover and all these folks. They're all from that area. And so I grew up amongst all these people and learning the literature and teaching to the older folks and opening meetings and things of that nature as a kid. And so I got immersed into it, but it helped pay the bills because you can't get a job when you're 13 and you're trying to prevent you and your siblings becoming wards of the state. So Chicago, man, you do what you got to do to survive. I did a whole other host of things. I won't incriminate myself, but you do what you got to do to survive in the city. And then from then, I began to read newspapers, just to be quite honest about it. I'm coming into the 90s now, starting high school. I end up going to Lindblom Technical High School after spending half of my first semester at Simeon. Simeon is mostly known for sports. This is the home of some of the most famous athletes coming out of the city of Chicago. Derrick Rose, probably the most recent one that most people know about from Simeon. But I knew everybody there, so I knew I wouldn't last long there. And so I had a cousin, female, who moved from California with my uncle, who's a radiologist. And long story short, he had a child out of wedlock. And so he tried to take care of his child, and he wanted to go to the best school in the city, and Lindblom was one of them. They were number 2 academic institution in the state. You had to take not 1, but 2 tests to get in. So I didn't plan on going to Lindblom. I went over there with her, just protect her from the vice lords around there, so she could take this test to get in. And I couldn't just sit there. They made me take the test too, and ended up getting in, ended up going to Lindblom. And then she didn't last a semester before she got kicked out, sent right back to California. But that's a story for the other day. So I ended up graduating from there and changing my whole worldview about what situations were. So I began to read the newspaper a little bit more. This is when the Bulls won the championships. Most people just read the sports section. I'm reading the newspaper, and the newspaper is teaching me things like we get mandatory minimums for crack cocaine. You get mandatory minimums for automatic weapons, right? So I stopped selling crack, stopped selling weed. It was a misdemeanor. I stopped carrying knives. It got me at 38. So robbers is a misdemeanor. So I got locked up about 27 times. Stopped counting at 27, but never did any time. I mean, little county time here and there, little jail time, but no prison time, because most of my charges were misdemeanors because I made sure I never caught a felony. And so I spent a lot of time on probation and things of that nature. And so as I began to read more and more about the Clinton era, this is Clinton coming into office again, and learning more about his policies by reading those papers and talking to elders in the neighborhood, I began to learn about martyrs like Emmett Till from Chicago, martyrs like Fred Hampton from Chicago. And I began to figure out how to get out of the city. So I graduated high school with a 0.8 GPA. I can't make this stuff up, man. I had a 12, or wasn't 11, a 12 on the ACT. So I went to the only school you get in with a 0.8 GPA and a 12 on the ACT. And the projects in the Dearborns was this organization called ADS McKinley. And they helped get people like me into college, mostly HBCUs. So Southern University, A&M College in Baton Rouge, let me in. If I get there, you get in. They had an open door policy. So that's how I got out to see Chicago, and I ain't looked back since. So when I got to college, I had a professor, historian, by the name of Eva Baham. She tried to adopt me. That's another conversation. But she was the HBCUs are different, man. It's not like some of these other white institutions I went to. They nurture you. So if I don't come to class, I could be hungover, laying in the bed in my underwear. She knocking on that door.
That's
And
right.
grabbing
That's
my
right.
ear, embarrassing me, marching me across campus in my underwear to class. And so that instilled a little bit more in me. I became a historian actually because of her. I had no intention of majoring in this particular field, but she was a historian and she drilled all these particular lessons in us. She taught ancient civilizations and she taught African American history. And then I ended up getting kicked out, and so I had to go back to Chicago.
Now,
And
what year did you complete your first 2
man, I didn't make
years?
it semester, man.
Oh, brother.
I didn't make it. Hey, man, it's the South, man. You go down there, city boys, man. It's too sweet. I mean, they leave the doors open. So I got all these out-of-state tuition, the fees I got to pay. And so the pawn shop man tell me what to get. So we had the #1 band in the nation. I'm stealing everything, man. Books, symbols, flutes, anything I get my hand on. I'm going to people's houses. They don't lock doors in the South. I had people helping me move stuff out, thinking I was doing a favor for the homeowner. We still a TV, whatever the man needed. And I take all that money and go pay my tuition fees with the controller's office, trying to stay in school. So I did all kind of stuff down there to get kicked out. But the last thing was David Duke was running for governor of Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to city bang. Chicago people, we rough. So we try to bully our way in everywhere we go. So we used to have these little, for lack of a better term, I call it city bang because it's like gang bangers. Chicago fight Shreveport. Chicago, Detroit, LA, New York fight Houston, New Orleans, and some other southern towns. We really no fight. We used to dominate these dudes. But they were just too big. There was always these big countries, caught strong dudes, and we was just always little skinny dudes. I was probably 140 pounds wet, but we were just too many of us though. We were just deeper from these cities, and they were just bigger than us. So we used to have some standstills every now and then. Long story short, we had wind of this march, or we were in Baton Rouge with the state capital, Louisiana, and David Duke was having a rally. And I just knew he was a Klansman. And I'm like, yeah, I've been letting this go on. So me and some other guys decided to say, if we could fight each other on campus all the time, living in this gladiator school, let's go with some Klansmen. And so that's what we did. And I got kicked out along with some others for allegedly starting a race riot when it was really majority of white people whooping the Klan than black folks out there. But we took it a little too far. So we get there, and there was a group of people doing nonviolent civil disobedience, holding hands. I had never seen and witnessed anything like that before. We went up there just looking to, whoop somebody. So we listened to our elders, held hands, blocked the passage for them walking them to the up the stairs so he could make his speech. And I didn't know who he was. They ain't got like sheets on. They got on suits. And I didn't know who they were. But he ended up spitting in this lady's face, and before I knew it, it was on. I just let you spit in this little 80-some-year-old Japanese lady face. So I kicked it off. I didn't know it was David Duke though. So because of that, they kicked me out. Like, well, you kicked it off from this leader of this Klan, so you got to go. So they sent me home. So I get back to Chicago. I go to community college, King Community College. I go back to the streets. I stay in school. I learned the school is a hustle. That if I get certain GPAs, I can get fellowships and Pell Grants and all that other stuff. So that's what I did. So when I wasn't in school, I got a job, valet parking cars at the Sheraton Hotel, downtown Chicago, where I met everybody in the sun, from Shaq to Chris Rock. I took all these people out on the town. I was the only black person working there. When Chris Rock or Shaq or Gary Payton, whoever wanted to hit somewhere, I put them in a cab and we'd go. Take them to the hood too, to the clique or whatever, and get them whatever they want, ladies, drugs, or whatever. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm on the block selling weed because all the drug dealers on the block, gang bangers with me, they smoke weed. So I can just sell to them. So the only difference between me and people, I argue when I give these kind of conversations to folks in prisons and others, and some other activist work that I do, that I ain't different from none of these other brothers on the block, man. Only difference is I stayed in school and I read and I applied myself. And then an incident took place where a couple people got killed. I was around. I didn't do it. I never killed nobody, but you know how it is. You're accessory. I got to get out of town. So I transferred as far away as I could, which was Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. So I was at home for about what was that? 3 semesters or a year and a half. While I was there, I was on probation. Got another case, so I was on probation working at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Popeye. I don't eat Popeye to this day. And working downtown, valet parking cars. I was doing too much, man. But I got out of there, transferred to Carbondale. Then my first semester down there, I got kicked out because now I'm in class with the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan of Illinois from DuQuoin, Illinois, and that's and they didn't have this guy in class named Matt Hale. He's from the World Church of the Creator from Peoria.
Matt Hale shot people, murdered people in Champaign and Chicago.
Man, I'm going to school with these fools, and they're in class. So I sent that class up so many times. So I got kicked out of there for fighting these white supremacists. Then I had a brother that I met. I took his class, Father Joseph Brown. I wouldn't be where I am today without Father Joseph Brown.
I know him. I know
he gets all the credit. He runs what then was the Black American Studies program.
That's right.
That's Africana Studies Department. We had to fight for. He's still there. He's from East St. Louis. So when I met him, he was, this gay, flamboyantly gay priest, black priest from East St. Louis. And I just watched the movie Malcolm X on DVD and thought I knew something, man. And when I called this man every derogatory term under the sun, and he never got mad. And he just kept saying a little bit to make me follow him, So I gained a little weight. I was about 200 pounds, about 5% body fat, swole. Couldn't tell me nothing. I take my shirt off to intimidate people. And so every now and then he'll say F you or something to keep me coming at him. And I'm in the classroom doing this. And class is over, then he go in his office and he'll say a little bit to get me following. Then get to his office, everybody following and said this idiot, me, is gonna actually whoop this professor because he's irking me. And so we get to his office, man. He puts the kid in the door. He opens the door and shocks him. He grabs me by the back of my neck and slams me into the office and closes the door. I wasn't expecting that. So I'm thinking, oh, man, you want to die. And, man, he got to read me. He said, go ahead, hit me. Take it all out on me. Get it out. So then he said, where you from? Let me guess. Southside Chicago. Let me see. Daddy in jail, mom on crack. You ain't got no guidance. So, man, I was crying like a baby when he got to read me, man. Man knew me from Joe Blow, but he can just see through all of that. And he said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kick you out of all your classes. So I'm like, here we go again, get kicked out of school. He's like, no, you're going to take 12 hours, semester work of courses, or independent study with me. And by that time, this is my third school. I had never read a book in my life. I might skim here and there, but I ain't never read a book cover to cover. So he just knew what to give me at the right time to get me on. So the first book he gave me was The Narrative of Life of Frederick Douglass. And it was on the popper from there. So that was the spring semester, January that semester. I had not read a book in my life. I read that book and just felt ashamed that, Douglass is talking about his liberation is not just breaking the chains, but literacy, right? Literacy is his freedom. Literacy is what gives him his education. They're learning that he's one of the greatest orators, self-taught people. Man, I just felt ashamed that here I am in 3 institutions, universities, colleges, ain't read nothing, and people like Douglass can die just for the ability to learn how to read and write. So I felt ashamed. But by the end of that semester, I read 87 books and wanted to major in Black Studies, but I couldn't because it was a program. You can only minor in it. So I ended up majoring in history. I majored in a number of other things. I had like 6 majors, but I ended up settling on history and minoring in Black Studies. And I never thought I'd be here. But that same Klansman, Father Brown taught me to quit using these and use my brain. He taught me a whole host of things, man. Bought me my first jacket, how to do a place setting, took me to conferences, speaking engagement when he was out doing activist work and all that kind of things. So I slowly became educated and literate and conscious and advocated, proponent of Black studies. I ended my homophobia, a whole host of things. Stopped womanizing. I stopped smoking weed. I still drink though. Still got to drink every now and then. Still do that.
Well, brother, that's what the consciousness does when it hits you. It changes you in terms of your lifestyle and your approach to the world. So I really appreciate that story, man. And you got to do a memoir or an autobiography.
Man, don't nobody want to read that. Everybody always telling me to write this memoir. Don't nobody read that sob story.
Well, it ain't a sob story, brother. It's a coming of age. It's a political transformation story. It's like the Battle of Algiers. It's like Malcolm X autobiography. It's like Monster by Cody, by
Yeah.
Monster, former Monster Cody, but Senika, that brother. All right, so now let's turn. I want to get into some of the technicalities of
Okay.
teaching Black studies, teaching the African American history, and I want to focus specifically on the African American survey course. And so, the kinds of things I want you to talk about is what's the textbook you use, what's the time frame of the course that you're teaching, and can you? I think you told me previously that there's two parts at Indiana. Y'all divide
Yeah.
African American history in half. So describe each half, briefly, and then focus on the half that you teach. And what I want to know is what are your course objectives? Yeah, yes. Let's just start there.
Well, so we divide our course at the IU, and actually everywhere I've been, UCLA, Kentucky, IU. I didn't teach it at Illinois, so I don't know how it was taught there. I
No,
taught
brother,
Black
we do
Panther
the
classes
long
there.
march. We do the origin of
Yeah, man, that's
man.
a lot to
So
cover in
as
one
far as
semester,
we can
man.
get. Yeah, I know.
That's a lot to cover in one semester, which is why we break it up. It's just too much. Our struggle is too important to look over things. And even the semester, we still can't cover everything,
Now we're gonna debate
even with
that.
two parts.
But
So
go ahead.
we break it up in two parts. We start with the from Africa to, I say, 1865 is the periodization. That's part one. Part two, if 1865 to the present. And we all teach it differently. Everyone has a different approach. Some people use textbooks, some people don't. I used to not use one until they published one that I was, I guess I could say I was more radical for me, which was Deborah Gray White, Mia Bay's "No Freedom on My Mind." And I ended up reviewing that textbook when they were trying to bring it out way back in 2007, 8, something like that. That's the one that I use. But in that first half, we start in Africa and we end with obviously the end of the Civil War, maybe a little bit into Reconstruction. I hate teaching the first half, quite honestly, because I can't be objective. I try to be objective when I do my teaching, but man, you can't talk about slavery and some of these atrocities and not want to hurt somebody. So we could be teaching about some of these issues, and these white kids are ruffling papers and reading newspapers, and I lose my mind. Hold on, this is my history. People done died, man. You ain't got to be here. So I done threw people out the room physically, snatch people up and toss them. We covering lynching, people hanging from ropes on these images, and you in your cell phone giggling and watching videos. I slam that phone through the window and throw them out the room. Well, you ain't supposed to do that, but I lose my temper in some of these areas, especially in that first half. Second half, I got a little bit more control. But you can't be talking about these crazy atrocities of slavery and be objective. You just can't. And you always get somebody that wants to just focus on the facts and not
brother,
really
there's no
connect in this way.
obligation to be objective. We opposed
Yeah,
to
I know.
the objectivity.
I'm in
We
the red
partisan.
state, man. You got to
We
do with all
partisan.
kind of crap in these red states, man.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so Kentucky and here, in these red states, you got to deal with all kind of issues. So maybe I didn't had the state legislators come after me, want to censor me, fire me because they don't like something I tweeted or some talk I'm giving like now in this podcast. I hear from these state legislators or somebody trying to get rid of me sooner or later. My light went out. So all these things happen every now and then. So what do you do when those things happen? You do the best you can. That's all you can. That's all one can do.
So now I want to come back to some of that stuff, but go ahead and so what are what's the themes that you're working with? Can you talk about course objectives? What is it that you want the students to learn at the end of the semester?
Right.
And
So
what kinds of supplemental materials do you use? Use primary
okay.
documents? What kind of films do you use?
So in both halves, but I primarily with Dr. Graham, Dr. Valerie Graham, she's witnessed me lose my temper a few times. So we come to conclusion that she'll do part one, I do part two. So in part two, it's more of a chronological approach, but also thematic. So I spend most of my time fostering critical thinking skills, trying to make sure that students at the end of the class have a great appreciation for how African American communities have contributed to American politics, culture, society. And the one critical thing that I focus on is citizenship. It's really about citizenship. Who's a citizen, who isn't? And so I try to engage students with these kind of critical thinking tools, critique these diverse ethical and like moral positions. We have environments that influence like ethics and morality. These are things that we talk about throughout the course of the semester of the term. And in doing so, I use the textbook only because I can't cover everything in 15 weeks. And I use a lot of documentaries. I use a lot of primary sources, photos, newspapers, people's private collections, things that I've collected, my own research sometimes. The greatest use of databases that I use is probably the History Makers database for visual representation,
brother.
and then Ethnic News Watch.
Brother, tell them what the History Makers database is, because
Okay.
it definitely has flown under the radar when it
Big time.
shouldn't. The other thing is that I want you to name some of the documentaries, because what we're trying to do is leave people with a curriculum, right? With a reading list, with a list of films, a list of novels. So,
all right. So I start at the beginning. So before I jump into the history, I start with some theories. So we start with race, the power of illusion, the difference between us. I want our students to understand what race is and what race isn't. Race is a social construction, it's not biology. So we spend a lot of time reading stuff like Lucius Outlaw, Towards Critical Theory of Race. We'll read maybe Pickens and Sykes, Mary Waters, some other folks that talk about these concepts of race, what race is. There's not biology or social, because we need to have this conversation. We do a lot of critical thinking tools. So what I tell my students when we come in the room is take everything you think you know, black folks too. Don't unlearn it. This ain't how I learn it, the movie. Just take everything you think you know out your head, sit on the box and close it over there. Because we all have our biases. We all come to these classes with preconceived notions of what we think we know, influenced by all these very hegemonic discourses. I get them a whole list of vocabulary terms. Hegemonic discourse is one of them that we'll come back to over and over in the course. Binary oppositions, institutional racism, hegemonic discourse, a definition of race. And I'm giving you all these terms, but that's what's on this list. And then after we spend a week on training ourselves on how to think, how to read these readings, I get them a reading form as well for that first week to train them how to dissect the term. Because you get students from freshmen to seniors, you don't know what you're gonna get in there. So with that reading form, what I try to do is train them how to find a thesis, how to read footnotes, that you should be looking at the footnotes and sources, how to read between the lines, and do some critical thinking analysis. So it's all in this form. And I ask them, not required, they only turned in the first week, but I asked them to use it every week for every reading that we have, because 50% of their grade is participation, is talking and having open, honest debate and conversation about these things. Then we dive into the history. So some of the documentaries I use, they vary. So I try to spend Tuesday watching documentaries, Thursdays going over all the material. I rarely lecture. It's more of a debate and discussion. So I force the students to pick groups together and lead discussion. So, and you can't know each other, you can't be friends. Because what we do is we talk about all these controversial, these racial issues in our own comfort zone. So all the black kids over here, Latino, LGBTQ, nope, we all gonna get together. And all these folks who would never spend any time together, y'all gotta work as a group this week and lead discussion on this material and force you to have these conversations prior to class. And then we dive into, because the classroom is the only, in my opinion, only safe space we have in America. We can actually have these open, honest, informed conversations about these emotional and confrontational subjects without repercussions. So we take deep dives into the subjects. One book that stands out more than others, Carol Anderson's White Rage. I just like the way she takes on these subjects. Nobody's talking about Iran-Contra and crack cocaine and Reaganomics. She's taking on everybody. So we read that book. We might read Depends on what mood I'm in, because the climate changes every semester, right? So more recently, I've been using like Akiele Mojos, We Will Shoot Back, some Panther stuff, Barbara Bransby's new book on Black Lives Matter, the move for black, make sure all Black Lives Matter. I forget what the exact title is. And I changed the books up here and there. So, but my staples are usually, I used to use Tim Tyson's Radio Free Dixie, because most folks have never heard of Robert Williams. So we got to talk about who he is. So I always find these underserved folks in history are pillars of our past that most students have never heard of. And so I focus at least 3 or 4 times in a semester on them. Marcus Garvey, In the Whirlwind. We watch that documentary, do some of those readings. And I go around. Then we have, we got to have quizzes and tests and so forth. So we do. I have a whole presentation I do on lynching. I use documentaries like Slavery by Another Name. I even use the Zoot Suit riots when we talk about the World War II and what's taking place in the home front. I've used some readings by Robin Kelly, obviously. Depends on what mood I'm in. I may use traditional stuff like Eyes on the Prize. I always use Negroes with Guns, because most people, you gotta know who Robert Williams is. I'm from Chicago, so we gonna watch Murder for Hampton. We're gonna use those documentaries, and I got other stuff like, I'm a hip hop generation, so we'll watch documentaries like Letter to the President, The Streets Get Political. Most people aren't familiar with that. We'll watch O.J. Simpson. We spent a week on O.J. Simpson and why that trial was so important, and in terms of race relations and the way in which all this racism becomes mainstream. I like documentaries on voting, because that's the critical issue of our day, voting. So documentaries like American Blackout, and I have about 6 or 7 more documents I use now that I might spend 4 weeks on voting, just because it's so important, because these young people don't vote. I cover Gina Six, Black Lives Matter. I cover a whole host of things. Newport People's Campaign, but it's thematic throughout the semester, but it's also chronological. So I need the textbook to help me cover material that we may not get to in class. So you can spend a whole class talking about civil rights and Black Power. I am a Black Power scholar, so I try to make sure I don't hijack certain aspects of history, because that's all we focus on. We read your work, actually. Civil Rights Long Movement's Vampire. We read that article in there.
Wait a minute, you read that with freshmen?
I read that with anybody, man. They can do what I tell them to do. Yes, they gotta do it. We read freshman and senior. I even use in graduate classes, because we talk about civil rights movement, because that's my forte. I do teach a class on civil rights and a class on Black Power too, so I may be interchanging it here. Maybe it's in those classes I use it, but I do use that article too. There's a whole lot of material, but the database, to go back, the History Makers database is an online resource that is a collection of videos of what the archivists call history makers. It's African Americans who made history at some point, and it's a great resource for a teacher tool, because it's searchable. So if you can put something there like Fred Hampton, for example, and you type that name in, you might get 1,000 videos. So then you have to narrow the search. Fred Hampton, Rainbow Coalition, something like that. Then you might get 6 videos. Then when you click on it, it may be a 2-3 hour long interview with that person, but it'll be narrowed down to that one little 12-second clip when that person talks about Fred Hampton. Then it's also transcribed and highlighted, so you can copy and paste it. You can hit the little cite button and pick what style you use, MLA, Chicago, Sarabian, whatever, and cite it so you can use it right. So I use it for that reason, because I ain't got time to teach these kids writing. It's just too much work. They don't pay me enough for that. And then you get, I use
Jakobi, let me slow you down. Were you at Illinois when we worked with Julia to produce that searchable database for history makers?
I don't think so. When I know Abdul Kalamat was putting something together. He was working on something. On his
Abdul wasn't involved. He wasn't involved in this project, but yeah. So History Makers is the largest collection of interviews with African Americans in the world.
And it's all searchable. And it's not just, so they got these various categories, right? Where the history makers in politics, sports, media, grassroots activists, it runs the gamut. And then you get interviews with people who from those periods. Like if you're talking about Emmett Till, you might have all of his cousins, families, relatives, people in the community who were affected by it. You can put Emmett Till in there and find politicians from today talking about when they saw that picture as a child. It's all these different references you can find. So and it's a very underused resource. I know the history makers is working with librarians, others trying to find ambassadors on campuses to get in the library. So I am one of the ambassadors at IU. So I use it because it's a great teaching tool, and I use my own research. I started my book with the history makers. History makers started on Southside Chicago in 2000 on Michigan Avenue, where the office was. And so that's when my book started, because you couldn't find no Panthers. Like, where the Panthers at? Who you gonna interview? And so you go to history making, see if they found anybody and so forth. So they know something that's in there. So it started
when he walked up to the third floor and all those stairs.
Hey, man, you gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. All right.
So I started using it. I might have been the first 3 or 4 people to ever use it, actually. But it's grown into a whole big conglomerate now. And we all should be using it as a resource. So I just did 2 or 3 professional developments for teachers. I did one for the Chicago Public Schools, and I did one for the National Humanities Center, who had 900 some teachers from around the country tuned in. So I'm always playing up this database because it's a good teaching tool for students that they can access, because they don't want to read the books, but they'll watch the damn video. It's shame, but that's what they do. The other one I use is Ethnic News Watch. It's also a database. It's a collection of all the African American newspapers historically. So as historians, we look to the past, and I don't want you just relying on mainstream press. You need these alternative presses. So they've collected not just African American newspaper, almost every ethnicity had one: Native Americans, Jewish communities, and so forth, so on. Latinos, Latino, for example, everything's in there historically, and so you can use that. And it's also searchable. It's not a PDF, so it comes up like a Word file, and whatever you're looking for is highlighted in yellow. You can most of them got abstracts, and then you can also hit the cite button too, so you can copy and paste the little transcriptions in there. So it's all usable. So it does the research for students.
Do you use the Black Past at all?
Say again?
Do you use the Black Past?
I'm not familiar with the Black Past.
Type it in, you'll find man, he's collected all of these speeches and writings going back into the 18th century.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, primary documents out the wazoo.
Out the wazoo.
Yeah, okay. Out the wazoo. In fact, that's mainly what I use now.
That's PAST?
Yeah, PAST, the Black Past. Quintar Taylor out of Washington University started putting this together about 20 years ago now. But look, brother, I want to shift you, because we're going to have some other guests joining us to talk about a contemporary struggle on campus. So I want to kind of close that out with this question. I know you're familiar with the writings of Earl Thorpe. Mm-hmm. Thorpe was, I would say, he's the pioneering African-American historiographer, meaning the person who writes about the writing of history after Woodson, right? And probably produced the most significant early works in the 60s and early 70s. So 2 works of his that come to mind is The Central Theme of Black History in 1969, and in 1970, Black Historians, which was a revisal of his 1958 Negro Historians. At any rate, Thorpe, in both works, makes this argument. And the argument he makes is that the central theme of Black history is, quote, the quest for freedom, equality, and manhood, unquote. Now, and when he says manhood, he's not using it as a synonym for humanity. He specifically means black
manhood.
Yeah, he means manhood.
Yeah.
And if so, let's make whatever criticisms you have to make about that, right?
Oh, well, but he's not wrong in number ways.
If you read the literature, there's a lot of folks who were talking about manhood, and they meant men. But that notion of the essence of Black history is the struggle for freedom, equality, and manhood. Now, we can substitute the struggle for self-determination as an alternative, or the struggle for social transformation. But the point is that he's emphasizing struggle. will you react to Thorpe's understanding of what constitutes the beating heart of Black history?
Yeah, so you got to put in historical context. This is 1969, 1970. This is height of the Black Power movement, Black Panther Party. This is the mantra. This is what Malcolm's saying, right? We trying to regain our manhood. Malcolm's funeral, you get Ozzie Davis eulogizing Malcolm, saying he was our Black manhood. This is the Black nationalist revolutionary trend of the day. So you got to understand it in that context. Yes, it's hyper masculine, but there was a part of our history where we didn't have to apologize for being masculine. We didn't have to apologize for our manhood, and that's what this period is assuming. But and the longer argument is what he's getting at, which is what I think we as a discipline are part of, is this long, protracted African-American liberation struggle. That our history is about struggle, and it's about gaining freedom, freedom in quotation marks, because everybody has a different idea what freedom means to them. Some means revolutionary overthrow of certain capitalist structures. Some mean the reforming system for equity. But at the end of the day, I mean, when we talk about, as a civil rights Black power scholar, I often tell teachers, we in our current context don't like to divide the two in those two genres anymore. We more argue as the African American liberation struggle, because you get a lot of strands overlap in some places. That's the best way of thinking it. So he's before his time in writing in what we are now arguing in our current context today, minus the manhood part, obviously. But in that period, this is a literal struggle happening. So this is 2022. Indiana University is celebrating our 50th anniversary as one of the first departments established in the country in Black Studies. Most people in 1969, 1970s establishing Black Studies programs. Folks are fighting for the establishment of Black Studies as a discipline on campus. This is the period he's writing in. Students are literally fighting and dying in the streets, in the classroom. Bunchy Carter and John Huggins at UCLA are dying in the classroom with the creation of Black Studies, and folks are advocating about their manhood. So this is part and parcel of the struggle and the movement at the time that birthed the discipline that I value, that I work in, that I chair. And so in 1970, when our department was established here on campus, it was led by students who were advocating as part of the Black student movement, as part of the Black Power movement. You had people like Herman Hudson and others who were doing institution building and the movement of Black Power too. And reasserting the emasculation of Black men was part of that. It was part of that struggle in that period. And so what he's writing is part. What I would argue is the scholarly equivalent to what's actually taking place on the campuses and in the communities at that period that birthed the discipline that we have now. And yes, we still are in the African American liberation struggle, still in the African American liberation movement. I don't feel liberated. Do you?
Of course not. Absolutely. So now we're going to make a pivot, and I'm going to bring on two sisters who will talk specifically about a struggle at Queens College in New York City around these very issues. The first I want to bring on is Natanya Duncan. Okay, I don't think she's. So I'm going to bring on Norka Blackman and asked her to describe for us what's going on at Queen City College. And so let me add Norka Blackman-Richards to the stream. And Miss Blackman-Richards, I've seen the listed demands. I've heard from Dr. Duncan the threat to her life that was posed. Can you contextualize what's going on at Queens College and how it fits into this discussion of teaching African American history? as a kind of hazardous profession.
Yeah, and I think Natanya just said that she joined. Um, I represent, and thank you so much for this space, and Dr. Jakobi Williams. I was listening behind, excellent stuff. Um, I represent I'm the director of the SEEK program, the Percy E. Sutton SEEK program. And if you know about the history of opportunity programs, this was one of the first opportunity programs in this nation that granted access to college to Black, at the time Puerto Rican, Black and Puerto Rican students to come into college with financial aid. When that 1965 opportunity bill was written, with support, academic support, because they were coming from high schools that were not the best. So they get an advisor, counselor. So the framers of this particular opportunity program that started in 1966 were people like David Dinkins, people like Basil Patterson, people like Percy E. Sutton, the great Shirley Chisholm, renowned activists in the nation. So they frame the institution of the establishment of this program within CUNY. Now, as part of this, our particular program, SEEK, was granted a building. Many of the programs across the university don't have that type of space. But because for 25 years, in the hopes that they would leave, the university kept them at the back, in the back. So students were getting classes on the sidewalk. They were housed in temporary structures. And in a way of reparations, the college said in 1991, we're going to redo this building and we're going to grant it to the program so that you can house your faculty, your staff, everyone, the students. It is this particular building that hosts this program, started by Black and brown people, that also continues to help Black students who have access into the university, that was targeted with racial epithets. This particular building that has been on the campus with us, we have been in the building for 30 years. We have dealt with students dealing with racism in classrooms, with racism outside, but never anything in the building. The building has become kind of like our sacred space. It's the safe space for Black and brown people. And suddenly now, on January 6th, one of our colleagues leaving the building sees this marked etch on a blackboard. You can imagine what that has created.
Can you describe what's written on the blackboard?
So what was there was a swastika and KKK lives. So in the building, we also have housed now a program called Ceru, which the director is Latina Jewish. And they run programs to help bringing together the communities, the Muslim students and the Jewish students. Mm-hmm. So it was targeted. We have no doubt about, at least the residents of the building have no doubt that this was a target on us. So we have tried to get the college to understand the severity of it. Statements have been made, but they're still lacking that centering and that safeguarding of the humanity in the building. And that is our current struggle. And Dr. Duncan can probably speak a little bit more about that.
Okay. Dr. Natanya Duncan, who is available now, she is the director of Africana Studies and Research Institute at Queens College. And if I understand this correctly, you were personally targeted. So that while there was a general targeting of the building that houses these programs, you also were personally targeted. Can you speak to what happened to you as well as the broader context of what's happening at Queens College right now?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you to Brother Williams for sharing his space with us this evening. I became Director of Africana Studies at Queens College as recently as August officially of 2020. So I've only been at Queens College, City University of New York, for approximately 6 months. And not fully 6 months yet. It won't be 6 months until the 25th of February in actuality. And in that time, I have launched a series of programming that actually targets and speaks to questions of race and racism and diversity and inclusion on the campus, programming that actually was born from conversations with students who said, this is what is lacking. We can't find the courses that are related to Black history or Black studies because they're listed in ways that they're all over the place. We don't see any courses being listed under the Africana Studies heading. And so we started working towards creating an environment that there was increased awareness of Africana and what Africana Studies means. And we did this through community-based programming. We brought in speakers from the community. We brought in scholars. We allowed the students to moderate. We allowed the students to ask questions publicly in the chat. And on January 6th, there was this epithet, the KKK lives, which I took as a threat, particularly because my office that I am contractually obligated to sit in happens to be right at one of the entrance doors to the building. In addition to that, my telephone number is a number that I've shared with students because we're in a virtual environment. And it's also a number that I have shared with other faculty and staff because we're in a virtual environment. And through email and telephone, because my voicemail is recorded on my email and it's also recorded as text message, I received a threat that referred to me as an NBITCH and said that I was going to be going down. And this happened after we began to respond as a collective to the swastika and the KKK lives threat.
So this is retaliation.
Yes, because when it was decided that we would send out a letter, we also determined that those of us who are in the building who actually carry a title. This wasn't about big you, little me, but those of us who carry a title. I'm the director of a program. Sister Norka is the director of a program. Sister Sophia is a director of a program. Sister Allison is a director of a program. Asia is a co-director of a program, that our names would be signed to the letter as representatives of the collective.
Mm-hmm.
And in
So
response,
can you tell us about the letter? What's the letter, and what beyond the letter, what are you doing to respond to these new aggressions?
okay. I'm going to let Sister Norka respond regarding the letter. I will say that in response to the new aggressions, collectively, meaning all occupants of color, regardless of their office or status, have decided that we will not be going back into Delaney Hall. School officially starts on tomorrow. We all have away messages on our email as automatic replies that state that we are delayed in responding as we are away from our physical office, and that we continue to await a step-by-step response that includes protective processes from the president of Queens College. There have been no protective measures put in place that we have been advised of since not one, not two, but 3 meetings with the president of the college. We have also met with members of his cabinet. In our letter, at which Norka will go into more detail, we ask specifically, first and foremost, that the incident be identified as a hate crime, that the racist epithets that were etched on the corkboard in the building be identified as such. Secondly, that immediate protective measures be taken to ensure the safety of the lives of not just us as faculty and staff, but the students that we serve, the students who come to the building for advisement, who take classes in that building, students who come to that building as I'm in between classes and I need somewhere to do my homework. There's a computer lab in that building. There is tutoring in that building. And we have not received any response for that. This is a health and safety issue as much as it is a hate crime. We've asked for transparency in terms of an investigative process. We've asked the college to form a committee that would implement a policy against hate language and hate behavior that comes with consequences and repercussions. That has yet to happen. We have gone as far as to make suggestions based on protocols that we know already exist on the campus, including panic buttons, which are available in the counseling and advising departments on the campus, to have those same protocols put in place in Delaney. And we've received no response. As a matter of fact, somebody called us a liar and said that there were no such things. However, we know firsthand that those buttons do exist. We also asked that there be an increased and a broader training of campus police and campus safety officers, because the safety officer that this was reported to was unaware that the symbol and the language constituted a problem in the first place.
What?
Yeah. That's what the officer claims. Yeah. And did not report it.
And the incident went without proper documentation or escalation until we decided that we were going to get on the mic, so to speak, and make noise about it. And the thing that's hurtful here, Baba, the thing that is hurtful here is the person who discovered this crime and reported the crime is somebody who comes to the building because the building he's actually assigned to is not a safe space for him. And so he was coming from a danger zone to the place that he knew would be okay for people like him and the students he wanted to serve. And he also wanted to be in a space where he knew the students would be okay about coming to. Because not every department or wing is a space that students necessarily feel comfortable coming to.
Right.
And since he was uncomfortable in the space and he knew the students were uncomfortable in the space, he decided to pick the neutral zone, which is Delaney Hall. Wow. And now here we're looking at someone who's saying, I'm a nomad. I'm in no man's land.
Right. There's no safe space.
Right. There's no place to call home. In my case, I have said to my president, I've said to my colleagues, and, I was just shared personally, I just lost my sister on Saturday, so my father can't lose any more children. I wouldn't have a chance to pray. I may not even have the chance to press the button. I won't have time to call anybody if someone should enter into my office space. If someone should come at me from the windows that surround my office space, because my windows are on the open green. So I'm literally a sitting duck.
So
I have nowhere to run.
Nat, you're telling us that Queens College administration have not acted on not just a hate crime, but a death threat. That they have not acted to provide protection. They have not acted to investigate and attempt to identify the person who is threatening a person's life.
They claim that there's an investigation underway and that due to police protocol, they are unable to divulge the process and stage of investigation. Now, us being us, we all sit down in meeting together and say, you don't have to tell us what was said, what or who said. We just want to know, has anybody contacted you? And you're in a Zoom with 40 plus people. And out of 40 plus people, nobody can say that they received contacts. Or including the person who reported the crime in the first place.
Right. So lately an email was sent out. And the email was sent out to a group of people, not everyone who works in the building. And interestingly enough, none of the administrators were copied in the email. And I counted about 10 of the staff members that the email was sent to no longer work for Queens College. So what was the point of sending this email? Right? And the people who got the email from my staff were very upset about it because they felt, why are you asking me, what do you need? What do we need to do to keep you safe? You're the experts, right? Mm-hmm. So that email has gone out about and not clear with there has been no timeline given. There has been no statement of or saying to us in the meetings. We had one meeting with the president and 2 meetings with other people. No one has been able to say specifically we're going to do this here when that has been lacking. I want to go back to the letter. Before I go back to the letter, because we're talking about history, this is how important this is. Besides the fact that the building has people of color and on that campus, a predominantly white campus, the building itself has a very important.
Yeah. Please speak to that. Speak to the name of the building, so we understand its historic significance.
Exactly. So the building is named after Dr. Lloyd T. Delaney. Dr. Lloyd T. Delaney was a faculty member at the time. I think he was the only Black man in the School of Psychology, in the Department of Psychology. Dr. Lloyd T. Delaney, I recently found out that he also worked tirelessly to integrate the schools here in Long Island, New York. If you know Long Island, you know that it's a highly... He worked tirelessly, was arrested as a professional doctor to make sure, and the year after he did it, the schools were integrated. This man died very young. He died at 46, very young. Can you imagine the weight of what he was carrying on his heart? He died of a heart attack. But that building in particular, when it was granted to the Sikh program, and they came together deciding the name of the building, the college had other plans, and they said, no, it has to be named after the first Black Sikh director on this campus, which was Dr. Lloyd Delaney. What had happened was that they had a correctional officer as the director of the Sikh program at the time when it started.
Wait.
Yes. This was a white correctional officer, and he treated the children, the young people, as the way he was,
per his profession.
Exactly. So what he did with them was kept saying to them, you cannot transition into the college courses. You need to be taking remedial. And you had people taking remedial 2-3 years before they were able to take one college course, which was totally ridiculous. So even that was done away with. There are no remedial courses any longer. And then on top of that, he would say to the students, the stipend that is coming to you because of the program, we're in crisis. Don't use the stipend. Give the program the stipend. No one understood what he was doing with the money. I've been reading some of the historical data, and it's kind of hilarious. He would not have the students get their money and tell them that the program needed the money, and no one knew what he was doing with the money. Long story short, the Black students said, enough of this. And they picked him up at his desk, put it on the quad, and said to the college, get a Black person in here, no more. No more. Kind of like what Dr. Williams was talking about. We don't want him any longer. So when they did that, and then we actually have the news clippings of it, the college then decided, okay, what are we going to do? So that's when they got Delaney, and he came over, became the director for 2 years, and then said, listen, I'm going to be the director of counseling, because there was a counseling arm to the program, and then they ushered someone in. So in honor of him, that building was named. Now, remember, also important point, not only was he the first Black director of Sikh, it is the only building on the campus named after a black
Like a
person.
black man. Yeah.
And it is the first building in the entire City University of New York named after the first person of color that was named, had a building after him, was Delaney. So this building in itself, the historical significance of this building, and for someone to tarnish that, it was targeted.
But
and we
also,
cannot, yes, go ahead.
Also important to the history here is the artwork and community support from the Black Panthers, from the local churches, people who have one-of-a-kind work, Black artists, one-of-a-kind pieces are hanging in Delaney Hall.
Which they donated when the building was given to the program. They donated these pieces to the program.
And so, to the credit of our administration, they have now decided that it is to be their business to come and look at that work and assess it and move forward with ensuring the artwork in the building. Meanwhile,
which we've asked for in many years. There have been many years that we've requested and they've never done anything, but this time they are going to.
But meanwhile, they're ensuring the artwork. Meanwhile, Norka and I are sitting in offices bracing ourselves, because if they steal the artwork, the university get a check. If somebody comes in there and, decides that it's time to relive Columbine or Mother Bethel AME,
Mother Emanuel, yeah,
right? They're coming and replay that.
Yep.
I mean, so let's go ahead, Jakobi.
So they're not worried about your lives; they're worried about the artwork. So what can we do to support you all in solidarity besides just blowing up the president's phone? What would you like us to do in our networks, with our NCBS connections and so forth and so on, to show solidarity?
And so, as you answer that, speak to the movement that you've built on campus to challenge this. And I don't want to start using profanity, but
so we challenged the statements. There were statements that were filtered out, and we publicly challenged the statements with a letter. And we noted that this issue of race has been a problem at the college, and it's not only Queens College, it's in the entire university for a while. And we went down specifics year by year, each one of the incidents, documented incidents. And we requested 4 simple things, actionable items. I'm going to read them here. 1, that the emotional and psychological impacts of the event that it has caused the residents of Delaney be recognized. 2, that we get a detailed timeline of the investigation along with specifics on what steps will be taken and by whom. 3, specifics on protective measures to be implemented to Delaney Hall residents, including the artwork donated by BIPOC artists. And 4, the establishment of a committee to develop a zero tolerance policy at which QC with member selection oversight from a collective that included minoritized faculty and staff. To these 4, we have received, and please correct me here, Dr. Duncan, I think the artwork has been the only thing that has been fully implemented here. We came to a meeting where I was moved to tears when I saw my staff crying, and these are professionals. You're talking about people with their PhDs. People are crying on the emotional impact that knowing that this was in the building that they hold so sacred before the college administration. So they were able to see how this hurt, right? But no acknowledgement has occurred about that specifically. A timeline for the investigation, except for that email, has not gone out. And what are going to be the protective measures for the humanity in the building? That is still lacking. I had conversations again today with one of the members of the administration, and I again pointed out this needs to be done. Until this is done, no one is going to go back to that building. And it's not that we don't want the building, it's the principle that stands and who we are. So we're waiting. If we ask what can be done, I guess, Dr. Natanya, you probably can outline some things that can be done. The union has backed us. The union has sent some strong letters, has picked up signatures. We have a group of white allies, about 100 of them signed letters, sent it to the president. So there's been a swell around this matter with people saying, hey, you need to listen to them. You need to, there are 4 actionable items. Let's get it done. So there is pressure. What we're not sure of is why hasn't the administration fully just said, listen, let's get it done.
So to Brother Jakobi, you asked a question. And, more than flooding the president of the college's phone, the chancellor of the City University of New York, who is the former president of Queens College, needs to feel, and that's Chancellor Matos, needs to hear from folk as well. Additionally,
let me hold you. Now, can you put in, can you or Sister Norka type in the chancellor's name and contact so that the people on the program can, in fact, begin to send letters?
Sister Norka, you want to put in Chancellor Natos information for us?
Okay, thank you. All right, sorry to interrupt you now, but I think it's important that we get that information out.
Yes. I think that this now needs to be a much larger conversation because, as Sister Norka pointed out, there is a history here, and it's not a 1970s history. In the letter that we sent out, we just started with 2013. And from 2013 to 2021, to be honest with you, they had 15 things, 15 incidents. And I said, okay, could we just pick 5 or 6, because we don't want to have this very long letter that they don't read. So we picked the ones that we said, okay, here's an attack against Muslim people. Here's an attack against brown and black people. Here's and just say, okay, so we recognize that racism on the campus is not just black and white, right? It's not just black, brown, and white people. There's something else going on here. But what is critical, and this is critical to the CUNY system as well, because the reason Queens College can get away without having a zero tolerance policy is that they're telling you that CUNY, the governing body, hasn't provided them one. They don't have a template. And they can't invent something or pull from something that doesn't already exist. Meanwhile, for example, at Queens College, our mass communications department has a statement on offensive language and abusive behavior on their department webpage. So we're not asking them to do anything that's not already in existence. Let's build on what we already have. Put on the college webpage that we are a safe space community that practices religious and sexual and racial tolerance, and that we do not advocate or encourage these types of behaviors, and persons who do so are not welcome here. What would it take to put that on the college webpage? In a little box? In a little box, on right where you say apply to Queens College, the next box should say a EEO statement. Serious. I mean, something along the lines of an EEO statement. That's practical and that's simple. So, Brother Williams, when you say, what is it that I would like to see happen? How can people support us? We're getting to the point where we have to decide, as a group, if we want to go to the community and say to the community, y'all want to come and sit on the lawn with us for a couple hours? Let's just take some pictures and see if Channel 7 News don't drive by. Do y'all want to start a Twitter thread and let's have a Twitter conversation about what's going on over here? because we could just, I mean, there are things that I think that we can do from a grassroots level. And yes, you know, I'm going to be very open and honest and frank, you know, because Bob is also one of my mentors, and Brother Williams is one of the people that I follow in the academy. You know, I'm an untenured Black female professor who's been in a job for less than 6 months. And I got all this mouth. Why? Because Sonia Sanchez told me that if I was going to go down, I better go down crying loud.
That's right.
There will be no silent death over here.
Good. Speak truth. Sister Nat, certainly we've got to create a groundswell of individuals taking action in terms of this letter writing campaign. But I know we had a discussion as the executive council at the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. But it seems to me that we need a coordinated campaign to get Black professional organizations, NCBS, the Association of Black Psychologists, the Association of Black social workers and sociologists, that we need to coordinate the Black studies infrastructure to respond, right? To respond to this. This is a crisis that touches us all. And one of the reasons I'm sensitive to this, I taught at the University of Missouri for 6 years, and those bitches not only threatened my life, I mean, I got death threats, but they also threatened what was at the time my 16-year-old daughter's life. And so, you know, teaching in Black studies, depending on where you are, is a hazardous profession. And we got to get some movement around that, because at this particular time, when they're moving to excise the teaching of Black history from the public schools, we need to understand what comes next.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing. The state of New York, just last fall, determined that African American history would now be a part of the core curriculum. This is a battle that Queen Mother Moore was fighting when I graduated from the Bronx High School of Science in 1996. I remember very distinctly that one of the things we mourned when Mother Moore passed was that we had all stood on the steps of City Hall with Mother Moore explaining why Black history had to be 365, why Black history had to have a certain designation in the City of New York curriculum, why it needed to be a part of the questions asked on a standardized test. Mother Moore was standing there telling them that they needed to put James Baldwin and Langston Hughes as a part of the reading comprehension exam in the City of New York. And so now I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, so we made this stride where we're saying that people are not going to get out of high school without knowing the difference between Rosa Parks and Maya Angelou. Applause for them. Then when we look at the city university system, where Africana studies, intro to Africana studies, Black women's history, African American history are all treated as sidebars. You have to actually say, I'm going to cross-list this course, at least at Queens. And there are programs and departments that have more collateral. One of the issues at Queens is that we went without a permanent director for a number of years. And as it worked out, as people retired, people passed on, the program suffered from attrition.
So why are y'all still a program and not a department?
Well,
why are you not a department?
We started off as a department. Mm-hmm. Right? Dr. Kojo established us as a department in 1971, and I found the paperwork. Mm-hmm. We were Africana Studies, the Department of Africana Studies and Research Institutes. Mm-hmm. I arrived at Queens College and I'm calling it the Department of Africana Studies and Research Institute, and I get an admonishment email from the administration telling me, no, you're not. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, according to the history that I'm reading and the minutes of the Senate of Queens College, this is what the name of where I now work and I'm the director of is. So what should I call it? The administrator, who had been at Queens College for more than 10 years, informed me that she didn't know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She was unaware. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because in her mind, Africana Studies was always the Intro to Africana. And the Intro to Africana was really African Civilizations 1 and 2. And they taught those 2 courses and tried to pass that off as running Africana studies.
So can I just jump in here to say the following? This
Yes,
demotion that occurs with Black studies is the same thing that occurred with the Sikh program. The Sikh program was a department from which many ethnic studies were born. They took faculty from the Sikh program, at the time Sikh department, and created all these ethnic studies, but then they demoted the department to a program and cut out most of the faculty lines. We still have them at Queen's College, we still have them at John Jay, but a lot of the programs don't have faculty lines, and practically squeezed and are still squeezing the budget of these programs. So we get federally funded. Not federally, the state sends money to the city university and says, okay, this money is for the Sikh program because it is a legislative program. But still yet, when you're running the program, you're constantly we're cutting your budget. Now I had 1,200 students before COVID. Now I have about 800. Look at how COVID has impacted. And I'm consistently sitting on pins because when are they cutting my budget? Did the money come down yet? Now remember, it's not for lack of money. The money is allocated. But something happens at the higher level where the money doesn't trickle down, or it trickles down in bits and pieces, totally dismantling and stifling the life of the program. So it's a consistent demotion, a consistent dismantling of anything that has to do with Black studies in the university. And we have tried to address it. We have written letters. People have said, yes, you're right, but nothing has been seriously done about it.
I will tell you that when I started meeting with students and faculty and alumni, there was one word that I kept hearing over and over again, and it was abandoned. Africana had been abandoned. Africana was suffering from abandonment. Why? They refused to hire. And when departments ran searches, there was no infrastructure in place to say, please cast a wide enough net that you might possibly attract persons of color who could then teach on both sides, teach in mathematics and teach in Africana, teach in economics and teach in Africana. And so there was a sort of sequestering. Africana could only be one thing and do one thing and offer but so many classes. And even the classes that were on the books, that had been on the books since the 1980s, they're classes that admittedly the department chairs that they're cross-listed with said, well, we haven't taught that in 11 years, Nat. Where are you finding this in the book? I just became department chair 3 years ago. I've been here for 17 years. I didn't even know we had a class called that.
Wow.
And so, you're fighting this uphill battle. You're trying to, you're trying to get creative and say, well, when you're hiring again, would you consider so that we could cover this course and then I'll create another course and then, and doing all of this bartering and begging but the City University of New York has what we call a Bresci mandate. They got Mellon money, Mellon Foundation money, and not peanut money either. Big Mellon money to do curriculum and faculty development and implementation. They are supposed to hire faculty of color. They're supposed to be creating these classes. They're supposed to be increasing the number of students of color through coordinated programming. And what have we spent a year doing? Meeting about what we're going to meet about when we meet.
So what is the state? I mean, that these institutions only react to movements. They only react to pressure, right? What's the level of student involvement in the coalition? How broad is the coalition that you guys built? Does it span across the CUNY system? Or is it tightly wound to just Queens? What's the nature of the struggle there?
We have received support from the Black Faculty and Staff Association of the University of New York. We've also received support from the Council of Directors of Africana Studies for the City University of New York, which I am president of that council. We recognize that our situation is not different than Medgar Evers, John Jay, Kingsborough, Baruch, okay? What is different in our situation, however, is that one, we don't have the number of full professors of color that a John Jay or Baruch has. That, and the reason being that they have departments. They have department status that then calls for the hiring of specific faculty lines. So I have to be, infiltrating job searches. Oh, I volunteer to be on the job search, and you kind of, people are giving you the eye, why you want to be all over the place? You overworking. Like, I'm trying to build with you. I'm trying to build with you because I need to bring 2 or 3 more people here so that I don't have to be the Lone Ranger, right? That's part of the strategy. The other part of the strategy is, and we've been, SEEK has has programs throughout the CUNY system. And so there are multiple directors that are meeting and talking and informing and exchanging information and talking about not just the impact at Queens, but the ripple effect on other campuses. And so therefore they are galvanizing. Now, because it's a public space, Baba, I'm going to stop there. But I would tell you that we are a good army and that we have our structure in place so that when 1st Regiment go out and get tired, 2nd and 3rd flank is coming. We refuse to be quiet because we know we're not alone. That's right. We know that when we make the noise, it draws the others out.
That's right. Good.
That's right.
Jakobi, we're coming down. We got about 3 minutes left, and technically we got 2 minutes left before I have to go, really. So, Jakobi, do you have any concluding comments that speak to this situation, Black Studies, that speak to the teaching of African American history, or whatever you want to talk about? Concluding statement.
Well, add me to that flank, and we got a network of activists too. Because your struggle is our struggle. Don't get me wrong, we've been at the department since 1970, and we just had the same fight on this campus. The folks have been trying to get rid of us through attrition. They tried to turn us from a department to a program. They created something called race migration ingenuity and just say, we can just throw all y'all in there. No, you're not throwing us nowhere. So we've had that same struggle. And our struggle, what we did was turn to the others who had it too, right? For example, when Leslie Alexander and folks were having that struggle, Cornell turned everybody. When UCLA was having a struggle, they turned everybody. So we did the same thing. Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Southern Illinois University Carbondale, having the same struggle. We let out senators, state senators, chancellors, presidents. We marched on that campus. We called in our network, and our network are our associations. So that's what we as at IU did. We leaned on. One of my colleagues is a board member at NCBS. We lean on OSWAD, we lean on NCBS, we lean on ASALA, we lean on all the associations to circle the wagons and let them know that we march on those campuses. It ain't just the community. You got PhDs coming up there too. And we bringing our network with us. So lean on us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well spoken.
Our discipline comes out of the struggle, and then we got to struggle to keep our damn discipline. The cycle continues, man.
Absolutely. That is the cycle. Nothing but struggle. I want to thank you, Dr. Natanya Duncan and Ms. Nakoka Blackman-Richards, for sharing the struggle of Queens College and making it a struggle of Black Africana Studies as a discipline, that we all have to get involved in this struggle. So thank you. And my brother, Jakobi, thank you, brother, for gracing my program. All right, let me bring us out.